How we doing? Doing well? Good? Good. Can I tell you, one of the things I love about the Bible is that it's real. And by that, what I mean is not that it all really happened. I mean, that's true too, and I love that too. But when I say that the Bible is real, what I mean is that the Bible is honest about the realities of life, about the complexities of life. What I mean is that the Bible never pretends like once you start following Jesus, all your problems are going to go away. Like everything is going to be easy from there on out. And the Lord is, if you just have enough faith and trust Him, He's just going to fill your life with blessings. And no one you love is ever going to get sick. And He's going to lead you from one success to another. And He's going to prosper you. The Bible doesn't talk like that. You might be able to find a TikTok preacher that will tell you that. But she or he did not find that from the Scriptures. No, the Bible is honest and real about how life actually works. And I'm glad for that. Like, I think the first three verses of Psalm 23 are beautiful and true. The Lord is my shepherd, and He leads me into green pastures and beside quiet waters, and He renews my life. I think that's beautiful and true, but if that's all the psalm ever said, if that's all it ever talked about, I think I might have a hard time believing all of it. Because I've seen enough life to know better. The young man in our campus ministry who has a 12-year-old brother who for 2 years had been fighting leukemia. And after 2 years, his young brother finally looked like he was overcoming it and he was about to make it through. And then suddenly something took a turn. A complication with a surgery caused a number of other things. And then last month, he passed away. A young family in our church with these 3 boys and a dad who was a good dad and a good and loving husband and a good leader in the family who loved the Lord and cared for them. And then somewhere along the line, it was almost like this switch just flipped and that dad began to spiral into a life of alcoholism and became less and less available until finally he just abandoned his family. Spent a little bit of time homeless, actually, kind of living on the streets before last year taking his own life, leaving these 3 boys without a dad. A young woman from our church just down the street from me who had dreamed about being married one day and waited so long. She lived single for a while and finally found a man that she loved and could settle down with, and she married him and was so happy for 2 years. And then after 2 years, he left her, leaving her heartbroken and devastated. I have seen enough life to know that it doesn't always go smoothly, that it's not always easy for those who follow Jesus. And I know that most of you in this room are much younger than I, but I'm sure that you have seen enough life. Actually, I know because of what just happened as Craig came out and asked who's going through dark valleys. I know that you have seen enough to know that life is not always easy, but the Bible is real and honest about these truths. Actually, when you read through the Psalms, they go all over the place. There are some of these Psalms that bring you to the highest of high, and the Lord is good and loving, and His faithful love endures forever, and He will care for us, and He will take care of us. And then you'll see other Psalms that go to the lowest of lows that will say things like, "Where are you, God? Like, I know that you hear me, but it doesn't feel like you hear me. I know that you're with me, but it doesn't feel like you're with me." And we'll see all of those things in the Psalms. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the fact that the same David who wrote verses 1 through 3 in Psalm 23 also wrote verse 4, which goes like this. "Even when I go through the darkest valley, I fear no danger, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Now, there are different categories of Psalms. There's 150 Psalms in this book here, 150 Psalms, but they're not all the same. They don't read all the same. They're different categories and different types. Some of the Psalms are called, we call them songs of lament. They're specific Psalms that are meant to be sung in times of sorrow and sadness. There are some of them that are called pilgrimage Psalms, which were the songs that the people of God would sing on the way to the temple in the city of Jerusalem. There are corporate worship songs that they would sing in the temple courts. Psalm 23 is what's known as a psalm of trust. And in Psalms of trust, these are Psalms that the writer writes to declare their trust in God even in the middle of a difficult or scary situation. And it's not really clear from our psalm here what specific situation David is going through, what he's walking through in the middle of this. We know that there were plenty of hard times for him, but what is pretty clear is that David knows at least two things. Here's the first one. David knows that life is not all green pastures. That is, it's not always easy. Notice what David says here. He does not say, if I go through darkest valley. No, he says, when I go through darkest valley. It will happen, and David has gone through some dark valleys. When he's your age, the prophet Samuel comes to his house on a basically secret mission. He comes to David's house, to his father Jesse's house, and he interviews and talks to all of Jesse's sons, and he's there to anoint one of them king of Israel. He ends up choosing David, and the reason this is a secret mission is because Israel already has a king, Saul. So what Samuel is doing in this moment is an act of treason, but God has rejected Saul, and he's chosen David. And what could have happened in that moment is David could have gone, that's it. God says, I'm king now. And he could have decided to kind of start a revolution and make a run for the throne to try to put himself on top. But David doesn't do that. Instead, he waits patiently for the Lord's timing. As a matter of fact, he even spends some time serving the current king, King Saul. He serves in his court for a little while, and he serves as a commander in his army. And do you know what David gets for all his patience? Do you know what David gets for all his loyal service to the king? He gets King Saul trying to kill him. He gets King Saul chasing him down, and David has to run and flee for his life, and he ends up living out in the wilderness and out in the woods for a while. He's supposed to be the rightful king of Israel, and here he is being hunted down by the armies of Israel. And there had to be a moment where David says, seriously, God? Like, I didn't ask for this. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to be faithful. I'm trying to wait for you. And this is how this turns out for me? A little later in David's life, just before his 30th birthday, his very best friend in all the world is killed in battle. A little while after that, once David is king, he'll have a young son who only lives a few weeks before he ends up dying as an infant. Much later than that, David will have another son who turns on him and starts a coup, ends up getting the whole nation to turn on him so that David and the rest of his family have to flee Jerusalem for his life. And some of these painful moments that David has gone through in his life, some of these things that he's walked through are a result of his own sinful choices. He brought them upon himself. Some of them are not. Some of them he's just living life and trying to do the right thing, but they come upon him. But the reality, the truth is, David, no matter what it is, he is no stranger to dark valleys. And my guess is, no, I know that many of you in here are no stranger to dark valleys. Some of you in this room stood and watched your own families be torn apart by a parent's messy divorce. And you felt like the foundation of your home, all the security you knew in your life just began to crumble around you, and you felt caught in the middle and didn't know what to do. Some of you in here are wrestling with a very real mental illness, not just the normal worries and stresses and sadness that we all face from time to time, but like a clinical level of mental illness. And you want to be free of it, but it feels like it's got its claws in you, and you don't know how to break free. Some of you in here, through your own selfishness, you have hurt the people that you love most. You've severed relationships. You walk around with a shame inside of you that feels unbearable at times. Maybe you've lost a loved one to cancer or an accident, but you feel in this moment, right now in this room, you feel like you are in the middle of the deepest, darkest valley, and you feel alone, and you feel like you cannot find your way out. And maybe you've wondered, where is God in all of this? What happened to green pastures? Isn't he supposed to lead me into those things? And the truth is, the answer is yes. He leads us to green pastures. He leads us to still waters, but the path to get there might not always look like you think. Back in January, I had the opportunity to go to Ireland, to Northern Ireland, with actually a CIY Engage trip. Actually, we went and worked with the very ministry that you guys are raising money for this week, the Riot House. I got to hang out with Richie and Aiden there, and it was a great trip. I would encourage you to consider a trip with Engage. It was so wonderful. But Ireland is a beautiful country. Everything about it, the architecture, the buildings, the landscape, everything about it is beautiful. One of the first things you notice when you go to Ireland, I noticed even from the plane, like hadn't even landed yet, and I'm looking out the window, first thing you notice is how green everything is. It's crazy, so much so that I thought they had spray painted the grass as we were landing into the airport. Because it was January, and I'm thinking, nowhere is this green in the middle of January. This has got to be some sort of gimmick, you know? They're supposed to be the Emerald Isle, so maybe they do this for all the tourists. Spray it green. It's not spray painted. It's legitimately green like that all year long. It was shocking to me. And this is one of the reasons that Ireland is such a great place for sheep. Sheep and wool, they're some of like the big kind of staples of the Irish economy because it's essentially just wall-to-wall green pastures in Ireland everywhere you look. And I think when we read Psalm 23, it can be easy to kind of have that image in mind, just miles and miles of rolling green hills that the sheep are hanging out in. But you need to know, that's not the world that David writes this psalm from. He doesn't write this in Ireland. He writes this in the semi-arid climate of Israel, which does have its green pastures, especially during the rainy seasons. But during the rest of the year, those green pastures, they exist, but they are few and far between. And the shepherd is going to have to lead the sheep through some wilderness sometimes, and maybe even through some dark valleys to get there. And that is what our life is like. And the Bible's clear about that our life can be like that. The Bible never promises that life will just be one giant green pasture, that we'll never have to walk through valleys to get there. What it does promise us is that those who know Jesus will never walk through it alone. And that leads us to the second thing that David knows. He knows that life is not all green pastures, but he also knows this, that even in dark valleys, our good shepherd is with us. That's what he says there in verse 4. I fear no danger in the darkest valley. Why? For you are with me. For you are with me. David knows that he's with him, and he says this, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. What he's referring to are these two different tools that a shepherd would have in his hands. A rod was more like a club-like thing that the shepherd could use to attack any predators that were coming after the sheep. The rod would be like a longer staff that he could use to help navigate his sheep through difficult terrain. And so when he says that you've got a rod and staff and that they comfort me, what he's saying is that God guides him, but even as he guides him, he also fights for him. That he does both of those things at the same time, and that is protection for him. That is comfort for him. And the same is true, by the way, of everyone in this room who has made Jesus your shepherd. Yesterday, we read these words from Jesus in John chapter 10, where he describes himself as the good shepherd who leads his sheep and who knows them by name, and he lays down his life for them. But Jesus will say in that chapter that that's not the case for everyone who leads the sheep. Not every leader, not every so-called shepherd of the sheep will do that kind of thing for his people. Look at what he says in John chapter 10, starting in verse 12. He says, the hired hand, since he is not the shepherd and doesn't own the sheep, leaves them and runs away when he sees a wolf coming. The wolf then snatches and scatters them. This happens because he is a hired hand and doesn't care about the sheep. You see, there are some shepherds that people look to that aren't true shepherds. They're just hired hands. We talked about some of these yesterday. It might be people, or it might be success, or it might be money, or it might be health. And these are the kind of shepherds that will be with you in the good times, but they will quickly abandon you in the darkest valley. Like you can entrust your security to money, and you can use that to feel really good about yourself in the good times, but one bad turn in the stock market, and that shepherd is bailing on you. You can entrust yourself to health and to your beauty routines and to eating clean and to all your exercise, but all of that is out the window when cancer comes. Those kinds of shepherds will quickly abandon you, but that's not how it works with Jesus. What does he say about himself? Look at verse 14. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, I lay down my life for my sheep. He is no hired hand. He's not just in this for the pay. He knows his sheep. That's you. He loves his sheep. That's you. And he would lay down his life before he abandons you. Listen to this. Throughout the course of your life, your health may fade away. Jesus will not. Your home life may be a mess. Maybe a parent has walked out on you and abandoned your family, but this good shepherd will not walk out on you. You may have burned every bridge you have, and all of your friends are just done with you now, but Jesus is not done with you. He always stands ready with open arms to receive you, to forgive you, to restore you. He is a good shepherd who is with us in our highest points and in our lowest points. He is a good shepherd who loves us when we are at our best and even when we are at our worst. The same Jesus who leads you to lie down in green pastures will walk with you in the darkest valley. So here's the question for today. Do you see him? Are you keeping your eyes on him in the middle of those dark valleys, or are you looking somewhere else? There's this really cool thing that happens in the middle of Psalm 23. I don't know if you caught it. There's this shift that takes place. And I'll confess, I've read this psalm my entire life and never noticed this before until it was just pointed out to me recently. And that is that throughout the first half of the psalm, David continually refers to God in the third person. He is my shepherd. He leads me in green pastures. He lets me lie down next to still waters. But then right here in the middle of the psalm, in the middle of verse 4, in the middle of the darkest valley, there's a shift. What does he say? I will fear no danger, for you are with me. See, David's no longer talking about God in the third person anymore. David's no longer talking about God. Now David is talking to God. And that's because he knows that not only is God with him in the darkest valley, but he knows that he's going to have his eyes fixed on his shepherd in the middle of all that. And that last part is critical. Listen, for those of you who are in Christ, Jesus is always with you in your hardship. But we often miss out on that rest because we are too busy fixing our eyes in other places, namely on ourselves and on our problems. And I see this in students a lot. They may be genuinely wrestling with something like anxiety, but in the end, all of their thoughts and all of their talk is about their anxiety rather than about Jesus. And so it's no wonder that their anxiety looks so big and Jesus looks so small. It's no wonder that their anxiety feels like it's all over them and Jesus feels so distant from them. That's not the case. Jesus is bigger than their anxiety. Jesus is nearer than their fears. Jesus is nearer than the hardships that they're in the middle of, but they need to be able to fix their eyes on them. You need to be able to fix your eyes on your good shepherd in the middle of those moments. So how do you do that? We do that through the very things that we've been doing here this week. We do that through his word. I got to have my eyes in this book if I want to have my eyes on my shepherd. We do that through worship and singing songs about his goodness and his faithfulness to remind us. We do that through being in community of people who will pray for us, remind us of the truth. And listen, you might not be in a dark valley at this moment. Life might be going good for you, but I'm telling you, you need to begin to put these habits into practice now, so that when the dark valley comes, it will be easier to see Jesus. So where are you looking? In good times and in bad, where are you looking? Because I promise you, your good shepherd is there with you. Life will be hard sometimes. We will go through valleys. We will go through painful moments. But the good news is that we will never walk through those valleys alone. Our good shepherd always goes with us. We'll see you guys tomorrow.